All right, welcome to The Bottom Line, a look at the business news, and we focus on economic recovery. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to address the nation this week to possibly announce a further easing of the lockdown and outline this economic recovery plan. Well, last week he said he would soon release the plan after important deliberations, and today discussions towards finalising the plan were held at a meeting of the National Economic Development and Labour Council, or NEDLAC. NEDLAC, of course, bringing together government, business, labour and civil society players. Earlier, government presented a plan suggesting 8 priorities, including energy security, support for tourism and infrastructure development. Business and labour have also presented their plans, and delegates have been coordinating their efforts. So tonight we're asking what needs to be done to fix the broken economy, and we're assessing also what's been done thus far, including the 500 billion rand stimulus package announced earlier. To discuss first, we're joined by the chairman of Intellidex and financial analyst Stuart Theobald. Stuart, thank you for being with us. The president has been consulting government on the aspects of the recovery plan. And let's look at what was announced earlier. You specifically focusing on the 200 billion government-backed loan scheme supported by banks. This was the plan, but so little of that funding has been taken up by the businesses that it was meant to support. Do we even count the loan scheme as part of this stimulus package?
It's a good question, Francis. It was part of the money that was meant to support the economy during the lockdown. Now, the design of the scheme was done on certain assumptions about what the outlook was for businesses. It was on the assumption that the lockdown would be for an extensive period, that businesses wouldn't be able to resume full operation until well into the third or fourth quarter of the year. And in fact, what has happened is a faster emergence from lockdown with gradual economic sectors being able to resume activities faster than had initially been thought. So the lockdown period has been shorter than initially expected with the scheme. Also, the experience of businesses has not been as negative as had been initially expected. Businesses were able to adapt and find resources. Banks also were quite quick in assisting their clients with all kinds of relief mechanisms in terms of their existing facilities. So giving clients repayment holidays, interest breaks, and so on to help clients. And something like 18% of all loans in the banking industry received some kind of measure of that kind of support. Now, the bottom line is that demand for debt among businesses has not been as high as was anticipated at the time that the scheme was designed. And we've now reached the end of the lockdown period for most businesses. So now it's a case of looking into the future, understanding what the economy is going to be like, and for businesses to then strategize to meet that future economy and to find opportunities as best they can. And we're seeing that most businesses are trying to minimize the risk that they face. So they're trying to avoid taking on more debt. Yeah. So they're better prepared to handle unexpected outcomes.
Well, it's interesting what you say, that the recovery was quicker. The banks also stepped in anyway, so that helped some businesses. For others, I mean, tourism, they didn't know exactly when we would open up. And did government fundamentally miscalculate the ability of small businesses to just take on loan after loan after loan and not maybe retrench people, not downsize, and have no certainty? Was that a miscalculation?
I think there were miscalculations about the decisions that businesses had to make. So you're right, there's considerable uncertainty for those businesses. No idea when flights could resume, no idea when their businesses could get back to normal. And they're being asked to make a decision at that point about whether they should take on more debt. That no matter how you frame it, no matter how low the interest rate is, no matter how light the security requirements and collateral requirements are, it still amounts to a risk that the business faces, that they're going to have to pay back this money one day, one way or another. So for a business to have to make that decision when they really have no outlook into the future to be able to determine when it's going to be business as usual, well, unsurprisingly, many businesses chose not to do that. It's fundamentally in the nature of debt that it brings risk to businesses. Whenever you're taking on a debt, you're taking on the obligation to repay it. And you've got to make a call on what kind of position you're going to be in the future to determine whether you are going to be able to repay it. As we go into recession, and we saw exactly this after 2008 in the global financial crisis, businesses de-risk and consumers de-risk. So they reduce their debt load as a proportion of their assets in order to improve their resilience to be able to handle uncertainty and an uncertain outlook that they're not confident in. And that's what we're seeing happening again.
All right, so you were consulting on that specific area. Can I ask you very quickly for your overall assessment of the earlier 500 billion? Do we say that a lot of this was a failure? There was also problems with the UIF, fraud involved, problems finding the people who needed that 350 grant, the unemployed. Was it all a failure, or did it really make a difference to the economic fallout that we would have seen without it?
It wasn't all a failure. I think it overpromised and underdelivered. It was described as a 500 billion rand stimulus package. That word stimulus was the wrong word. This was a support package. It was a package to support the economy through the lockdown process. And we needed to get to the end of that process. We needed a support package to bridge the economy through the lockdown, to ensure that there's as much of it as possible. Much of the economy was active as possible at the end of the lockdown. So it was support and not stimulus. Now we need stimulus, and that's got to be a different discussion. And that's what we need to come out of the president's current engagement with business and labour.
All right. Thank you very much. And I hope we can chat again and assess that stimulus coming out. That was the chairman of Intellidex, Stuart Theobald. And let's speak to someone now, an economist writing in the Business Day today, Duma Ngobule, saying that after 6 months after the start of the lockdown that triggered South Africa's biggest economic contraction ever, the government still has no real recovery plan. And we've been talking about the fact that this plan to be presented was discussed in NEDLAC today. He says what's been presented thus far is not promising at all. Duma Ngobule is the director of the Centre for Economic Development and Transformation. Thank you for joining us, Duma. It's incredible when you put it like this. The economy was decimated, and months later there's still talk over what a recovery plan should look like. Should that plan actually have kicked in after the hard lockdown?
You know, Stuart, your previous guest, actually pointed out in an article that 3 days before the lockdown in the UK, they implemented their stimulus package. So we waited 6 months later. We still don't have our stimulus. I mean, we don't have a recovery plan. So that is what I was talking about. And I actually went through the trouble of reading all the recovery plans by the ANC, by Business for South Africa, by the government, by Labour, by business, everybody. And quite frankly, there is no recovery plan. And by consensus of everybody at NEDLAC, the recovery plan by the government was the worst of the lot. It didn't have... the government hadn't put much thought into what they were writing. It's almost like they wrote... I can actually tell that they wrote it the night before.
Well, you say that government has no new ideas, but a question being asked, do we actually need new ideas? Or is it about the implementation of old ideas, the move to digital, the restructuring of Eskom, delayed, the opening of the grid to more solar energy, so fixing energy, the release of spectrum? Don't we already know what should be done, and it shouldn't take a pandemic to sort of re-engineer another wheel?
You know, they've been talking about these issues for a decade. But now what we have now, we have an immediate crisis of a collapse in demand. The things that you're talking about relate to the supply side of the economy. So what we've had now is a once-in-a-century pandemic, a collapse in demand, 51% annualized, 16.4% quarter to quarter, not annualized. So this is something that's never happened before. And now for you to take things that you are going to do, which you should have done under normal times, and you say that that's a solution for crisis times, it doesn't add up to me. So we need a special recovery plan that addresses the current situation. We've got a humanitarian crisis of rising unemployment. I estimate about 2 million people will get the increase in unemployment this year will be about 2 million people. We're going to have an unemployment of 12.4 million people and 45% according to the expanded definition. So that is what we should be addressing. And The grants are going to get finished in September. The government's going to stop them. They said the UIF payments are going to stop as well. So this is a miserable period for many South Africans that are heading.
Duma, thank you very much. So let me just tell you that a press release has been issued. NEDLAC social partners agree on an economic recovery action plan. So we now know that after those deliberations at NEDLAC today, there is actually a plan on the table, and the president, it says, will announce the details soon. You've said before, and you're hinting at it again, this incredible unemployment. You said that if we head to 50% unemployment, the expanded definition, when people have just given up looking for work, you don't even have a viable society. What do you mean by that? Because we have to continue. And how do you solve a problem like that, which you are calling a humanitarian crisis?
Yeah, so now just think about it. More than the majority of people are not working, and each of those people have got families to support. That's what I mean when I say the whole society becomes unviable. And you have to think about extraordinary measures to cushion the effect on those families. Now, unfortunately, what the government is talking about is infrastructure. We support that, yeah. But the point is, it doesn't deal with the immediate infrastructure, the immediate humanitarian crisis that we have. And unfortunately, the only way to sort that out is through providing basic income to millions of South Africans who are going to be destitute, homeless, hungry. We have to provide income. Now, Brazil had a higher debt to GDP ratio than South Africa entering into this depression. It was about 80 to 90%. We were at 60%. Now, Brazil implemented a corona voucher, 1,800 rands a month for 66 million people, 30% of the population, and that brought down poverty to record levels of poverty. Poverty went down in Brazil. So I'm just saying that these are the type of extraordinary things that we're doing. But what the government will announce tomorrow, I can even tell you what's going to be announced. They're going to announce a job plan that is 19.6 billion. They're going to announce this Operation Vulindlela. Then they're going to announce a compact for Eskom in terms of sorting out the balance sheet of Eskom. That's going to involve PIC converting its equity into a loan in Eskom to reduce the debt, and perhaps other measures to address the Eskom balance sheet problem here.
Well, there's so many issues to discuss, but let's pick up on the PIC equity boost. That's using pension fund money. There's been a fear that government will tap into people's pensions and put it into a black hole. Is that a fear you have?
No, I don't. I've been the biggest proponent for the PIC having a more developmental role in our country, because I believe that the assets in the PIC, 2 trillion rands in the middle of the pandemic, is way in excess of what's needed to pay the pensioners. Let me just give you an example. Last year, the payments to the pensioners were about 100 million. So the money is way in excess of what we need to pay the pensioners, and it's just absurd that we are keeping this fund at such a high level of funding here.
All right, so that's something you'd agree with. Overall, you're not very impressed with what's come out of NEDLAC in the past. We'll have to see what plan is put on the table tomorrow. You're making some predictions. But has it been valuable, finally, Duma, to get people sitting around a table, get all these different players maybe pushing in the same direction for a change rather than pulling in different directions? Has that been valuable?
Yes, but now we've been doing this, remember, for 25 years. NEDLAC was established in 1995. And I've been talking to the people at NEDLAC, and a friend of mine told me that, the only time we have an agreement is when the government doesn't have to pay, for example, the minimum wage and deals like that. So NEDLAC has never had a plan for the economy. There's no reason to think that NEDLAC will have a plan for the economy this year.
All right, thank you very much. That was Director of the Centre for Economic Development and Transformation. And the presidency, as I said, has issued a statement in just the last few minutes or so saying that NEDLAC agreed on an economic development plan. So the different players, government, the ANC, Labour, business, they all had separate plans. They coordinated their efforts. There was a task team put together. So they say there is something on the table, which the president will announce soon. All right, that was the bottom line. We take a break and then it's sporting action.